Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator of Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today is one of the videos I'm most excited about. This is one where we get to prove or disprove one of those urban legends that, I don't know, I've heard it my whole career. Even before I got involved in museum ships, I was hearing this, and you guys have probably heard it too. The Iowa-class battleships and the Midway Class Aircraft Carriers have the same engineering plant. That's what people say. However, as you'll see in this video, a lot of that is not entirely accurate. And we're going to try and get to the bottom of what specifically is meant by that. First and foremost, the information I'm presenting today is not my own research. One of the great things about this YouTube channel is sometimes people who know a lot more than I do watch the channel and are able to pick up information about that, sometimes not even stuff we're talking about, to help with their own research, and then they reach out to us and we're able to collaborate on things like this. So for today's video, I'm primarily presenting the research of Bob Hartman, who is a volunteer on the aircraft carrier USS Midway. Now, I have been on Midway before, but before we were filming these videos, so we have not gotten the chance to film on her yet, but she's on my short list to go and visit. But Bob, like many of you and myself, has heard, oh, Iowa-class battleships and Midway-class aircraft carriers has the same engineering plant, and seems like he goes through investigating a mystery in a very similar way to how we do it here. And so I'm going to present some of his story, some of the information we were able to find here to help complete his research. And I'm presenting this to you with his permission, and thanks to USS Midway for allowing us to do that. We hope to visit them in the future. We are in engine room number 4 on USS New Jersey right now. This is the aftermost engine. It feeds propeller number 3, which is the inboard port side propeller. All that information will come back up later on. So, people say that the Midway-class aircraft carriers are just modified Iowa-class battleships. They have very similar speed. The Midways are a more armored version of the aircraft carriers we were using during World War II. And their design generally grows from the same design process that sparks the Iowa and the Montana-class battleships. However, the two ships are not the same length, they're not the same width. They don't have the same hull form whatsoever. They don't have the same armor plating, and they don't have the same internal subdivision of their engineering plants. The Midways are really a parallel design to the Montana-class battleship, but not in that they were both built on the same hull. That's another misconception I hear. The Midways are just flight decks put on a Montana-class hull. Nope, again, look at the hull lengths and widths and everything else. They're not the same. One thing that Midway does that is similar to Montana, the treaty-limited battleships, the American fast battleships of the North Carolina, South Dakota, and Iowa class, all have engineering main spaces that go from one side of the ship to the other. The reason we did that, the reason they're designed like this, is because if we take a torpedo hit that defeats our torpedo defense system, which is likely because they weren't able to build as deep a defense system as they wanted because of the Panama Canal limiting the width of the ships, well then, if we have, like say, an internal bulkhead that goes down the center of all the engine rooms, we've got two boilers next to each other. We could easily have a bulkhead between that. We've got the engines on one side, the turbo generators on the other. We could easily have a bulkhead down the center of that. Doesn't add much weight, and we've doubled the subdivision. Great. If we take a torpedo, only half as much floods, right? The problem is it's asymmetric flooding. So the torpedo floods one half of the ship. We have to counterflood the other side to lower the ship in the water. That takes time and assumes we still have the power to run those pumps. And it means that we're still losing as much reserve of buoyancy. So in the U.S. Navy, engine room goes side to side, which means that we're going to sink level. We don't have to counterflood as much, and so we even if we don't have electrical power, we're still on an even keel, and we're not losing any additional reserve of buoyancy with counterflooding. The Montana-class battleships and the Midway-class aircraft carriers go back to the older form. Neither one is limited by treaties, so they're able to subdivide to a much greater degree. So they put the boiler rooms outside the engine rooms, so if a torpedo defeats the whole torpedo defense system, then it's only flooding one or maybe two boilers out, and the rest of your equipment on the inside is perfectly safe. And with all this extra subdivision, you've got extra counterflooding. A smaller space is being flooded in this case. So check out this diagram of the Midway class aircraft carriers. It's a really, really great subdivision scheme. Much better than the Iowa class. The only slight downside is it means that they are more cramped, which really matters to us as museum ships because it means that they can not take as large of a tour in their engineering spaces as we can take in ours because we've got these nice big spaces. The Iowa class, in some ways, are a better museum ship design than the Midway class. Although the Midway class has that beautiful hangar. Imagine all the classroom space and the event space in there even when the weather's bad. Not that they ever get bad weather out there. The engineering spaces are nothing alike. The hull forms are nothing alike. So that's not what people mean when they say the Midways and the Iowas have the same engineering plant. Both classes of ships use Babcock's and Wilcox M-type boilers. Both classes of ships are developing about 212,000 horsepower. Both classes of ships are designed to be about 45,000 tons standard and get up to a top speed around 33 knots. So, obviously there's some similarities here. But when you actually start looking at the engineering plant, the Iowas have 8 boilers, the Midways have 12. Because of all that internal subdivision, their boilers have to be smaller to fit in there, but they need more of them. So an Iowa-class boiler is 40% larger than one on the Midway, even though they're both Babcock's and Wilcox M-type boilers made in the 1940s. So it's not the boilers that are the same. Because they've got different volume, they're generating completely different amounts of steam. It's different. There's different numbers of them. So that only leaves the engines. Maybe the engines are the same between Iowa-class battleships and Midway-class aircraft carriers. So Bob is doing all this research, and he's on the West Coast, obviously, with Midway, so he goes and visits Iowa and looks at their engines and their boilers, and they're nothing alike. Nothing at all alike at all. They're not even made by the same company. Iowas are made by GE, and Midways are made by Westinghouse. So, and the numbers, even though they're using 600-pound steam to produce a certain amount of shaft horsepower, the actual numbers of how you get there, the rotations on the turbines, the rotations on the reduction gear, the rotations on the propeller shafts, are not the same. They're off by a small amount, but it proves that they're not the same engines. And even if he hadn't gone and visited Iowa and looked at those engines for himself and been like, yeah, no, they're nothing alike, any of you who have seen this question in the past has gone to, say, a book like Iowa-class Battleships by Summerall, a Naval Institute press book. They have the information for the Iowa-class battleships right in there. On page 137 in the engineering section, it tells you specifically the high-pressure turbine, blah, 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 4,905 RPM, a propeller speed of 202 RPM, output is 2,440 rated horsepower. It goes through a bunch of other numbers like these, and those numbers are nothing like Midway's numbers. Midway knows because they still have the plaques on their engines. But then Bob saw one of our videos where we're standing in front of one of the engines and goes, holy cow, that looks just like the ones on Midway. Now remember, when I went to Midway, I wasn't working on an Iowa-class battleship yet. So don't ask me what they look like. They look like gray boxes just like on all the other ships. I'm sure when I go back, I will have a more sophisticated eye towards that, but did not want to visit. But he says, holy cow, they look exactly the same. He reached out to our counterpart at Wisconsin, and our counterpart at Wisconsin told him that, oh yeah, Iowa and Missouri are built in New York and have GE equipment, but New Jersey and Wisconsin are built in Philadelphia and use Westinghouse machinery. Midway and Coral Sea used Westinghouse machinery, not GE machinery. So that's when he reached out to me. You seen a trend here? All of us museum ships work together and contact each other all the time. He reaches out to me and says, well, what's the information on your engines? So I went to the book and looked it up and told him exactly what was written there, which is the information from Iowa's GE plant, because she's the lead ship of the class. And he said, listen, I've got this theory, and I think your numbers are wrong. Can you go and check the actual plaques on the engines? And I said, oh, gee, Bob, I'd love to, but they've all been stripped off. So on a whim, we went through each of the engine rooms. Engine room 1, plaques missing. Engine room 2, missing. 3, missing. The crew took them as souvenirs when they left. We don't even know which crew, because the ship had 4 separate decommissionings when people were stripping parts off. Engine room 4 still has it, which is why we're down here in the dark, sitting in front of number 3 main engine in engine room number 4. And so when I read off the numbers from on here of what the high pressure turbine speed is coming into the engine, the low pressure turbine speed coming into the engine, not only is it different from what's listed in the book, what's listed in all the manuals and things for the ships, it's the same as what Midway had. It's the reduction gears and the turbines of the Westinghouse-equipped Iowa-class battleships and the Westinghouse-equipped Midway Class Aircraft Carriers that are the same. And we assume, but we don't have the information yet to look into this in more detail, Midway and Coral Sea both had Westinghouse. Franklin D. Roosevelt had General Electric equipment. And because she was a little bit different than the other two and possibly had more maintenance issues associated with her engineering plant, she was decommissioned and scrapped about 20 years earlier than Coral Sea and Midway. So we don't have her extant anymore to know what her engines were, but based on this information, our working theory at this time is that Franklin D. Roosevelt has the same engineering plant of Iowa and Missouri. So this is the coolest thing in the world for me, that we're able to use the archaeology of the things on the ship, that we're able to use our connections within the museum ship fleet and answer this mystery that people have been talking about for years. But what does it mean that these ships have the same hull or engines or whatever the lore is at the time? They have the same engines. Some of them have the same engines, because within the same class they don't even have the same engines. So this is just so cool. I hope you guys are getting as much of a kick about this mystery solving that Bob got to do and we all got to be a part of. So I hope you all are finding this as exciting as I am. If you can think of any other mysteries that you'd like to see us solve in the future, let us know in the comment section down below. I'd love to work with my contacts around the museum ship fleet and see if we can solve any more questions like this. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals. For today's video, we'd like to particularly thank Bob Hartman and the Midway Museum for their support in solving this mystery. If you would like to support the museum, you can also like, share, and subscribe so more people find out about the channel, or click on the link in the description below for ways to donate. Thanks for watching.